Okay, we'll move to the Standards and Assessment Committee report. Committee Chair Jennifer Gravitt. Let me get you, there we go. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. First item of action is 14.2. This is a new rule that was created as a result of House Bill 336, creating a pilot program so that students have different levels of certification. The motion before the board is that the committee moves that the board approve R277721 Prime Pilot Program Draft 2 on second and final reading.
The motion for the board is that the board approve R277721 Prime Pilot Program, Draft 2 on second and final reading. Is there any discussion to that motion? I see, Board Member Belknap.
My question is, Jenny, really, what does this do? Can you give it to me in a couple of sentences?
Well, I can try. So it creates, well, let me go back to my notes here from last month. So you have a pilot program that's going to create levels of certification for students who complete the required concurrent enrollment courses outlined in the bill. Then the certifications are transferable. They can be used for all institutions governed by the Board of Regents, grant requirements, application processes, et cetera. Does that give you enough of a understanding, or do you?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Perfect.
Okay. I feel like I can't think with my mask on, which is how I've been conducting school. So it's like it mushes my words, but I can try again if you want.
Does that satisfy your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Hey, the motion before us is the board approve R277721 Prime Pilot Program, Draft 2 on second and final reading. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Board Member Belknap?
Aye.
Board Member Bolter?
Aye.
Chair Huntsman?
Aye.
Board Member Nielsen?
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Next item is 14.3, the Utah Methods of Administration Plan. Just to kind of give you a quick overview, the goal of this was to harmonize with the Perkins 5 plan and align civil rights work. There's kind of a long summary in the Standards and Assessment summary that's really helpful for those of you who've looked at that. Anyway, without going into that, the committee moves that the board approve the Utah Methods of Administration Plan.
The motion for the board is that the board approve the Utah Methods of Administration Plan. Is there any discussion to that motion? Board Member Earl?
Yeah, I just want to point out, I guess this what I think is kind of interesting, but just a side note. So on page 3, there's a periodic compliance reviews. I'm just drawing attention that it's curious, the wording on what the guidance is for targeting what I think subrecipients with the greatest potential for civil rights noncompliance, instead of just a review. And I think our staff does a great job of outlining this, but it just is interesting that that's the guidance is to figure out the greatest potential for noncompliance, which is interesting to see that wording in there. Anyways, the point being that I'm grateful we have the staff we do. Hopefully our risk tool is not is adequate for what we need and doesn't overstep, so to where it's pre-policing people instead of allowing them to make choices. So.
Okay, seeing no further questions, the motion is that the board approve the Utah Methods of Administration Plan. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Board Member Belknap?
Aye.
Board Member Bolter?
Aye.
Chair Huntsman?
Aye.
Board Member Nielsen?
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously.
Okay, the next item is a repeal. This is a repeal of R277528, the use of Public Education Job Enhancement Program, PJEB funds. And it's sunsetted, so the sunset date in House Bill 10 was in 2020. So of July 1st. The motion before the board is the committee moves that the board repeal R277528, use of public education job enhancement program, PJEB funds on second and final reading.
The motion for the board is that the board repeal R277528, use of public education job enhancement program funds on second and final reading. Is there any discussion to that motion? I see none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Board Member Belknap?
Aye.
Board Member Bolter?
Aye.
Chair Huntsman?
Aye.
Board Member Nielsen?
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously.
Okay, item number 14.5, this is R277921, Strengthening College and Career Readiness Program. This is just an amendment and a continuation. It was just amended to update with existing language so that there's consistency between the rules R277306 and both rules regarding expectations for counseling, licensing, and certification. So a little bit of a cleanup there. Motion before the board is the committee moves that the board approve the amendment and continuation of R277921, Strengthening College and Career Readiness Program, Draft 2 on second and final reading.
Draft 2? Just clarifying.
Oh, yes, sorry, Draft 2.
Draft 2, okay. The motion before the board is that the board approve amendment and continuation of R277921, Strengthening College and Career Readiness Program, Draft 2, on second and final reading.
Chair, this is Lorraine.
Yes?
I'm confused about the motion because the motion from committee says draft 1, so did I miss something?
It does say Draft 1.
So is it draft 1? Okay.
It is Draft 1. I'm
Okay.
so sorry.
No, that's okay.
The brain, I'm telling you, the brain. No sleeping
And you don't
lately.
even have your mask on.
I know, I took it off, and so that's not my excuse, so I'm going to put it back on.
Okay, thank you, Lorraine. Okay, the motion for the board is that the board approve amendment and continuation of R277921, Strengthening College and Career Readiness Program, Draft 1, on second and final reading. Is there any discussion to that motion? Board Member Earl?
Yeah, just to note, make sure everybody understands that we're not just doing that, we're also, in doing that, we're actually doing the edited version of the standards. I don't, if you've read through that, just be aware of that. And there's quite a bit of political language in those standards that is somewhat ambiguous, and so I will not be voting for it.
Seeing no further discussion, Board Member Lear?
I was just curious, Jenny, if, like, I didn't read it as carefully as you did, and you were in the committee meeting. What political language do you find objectionable?
Okay, hold on just one second.
Is it okay?
There, go ahead,
Yeah.
Board Member Earl.
Standard 9, create a framework of social justice and transformative practices by implementing culturally competent strategies and interventions. There's a number of, first of all, you've got transformative. I'm not sure what exactly we're talking about when you're transforming. I would like that spelled out here. There's a number of practices from the promise schools across the nation that led to some weakening of different laws and different policies within different states. Specifically, you can, Andrew Bullock with the Parkland shooter, there was a number of policies there that were weakened based on trying to create some leniency. There's some things here that I would like to see spelled out exactly what we're doing instead of left up to, I just don't know what exactly these entail. So that's specifically what I'm looking at. So
That helps some,
okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Board Member Davis?
I was just going to ask for some examples as well. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, the motion before us is that board approve amendment and continuation of R277921, Strengthening College and Career Readiness Program, Draft 1, on second and final reading. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Board Member Belknap?
No.
Okay, Board Member Bolter?
No.
Chair Huntsman? Chair Huntsman?
No.
Board Member Nielsen?
No.
Okay, will the ayes please raise their hand? Okay, the ayes are Board Member Newell, Board Member Cannon, Board Member Haynes, Board Member Gravitt, Board Member Lear, Board Member Marsh, Board Member Hanson, and I'm an aye. That motion passes. So Board Member Davis was an abstention on that. Lorraine, do you have all the information you need for that motion?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
Okay. Item number 14.6 is R277403, the School Safety Program new. This rule just establishes parameters for the School Safety Pilot Program. And the motion before the board is that the committee moves that the board approve R277403, School Safety Program, Draft 1, on second and final reading.
the motion is that the board approve R277403, School Safety Program, Draft 1, on second and final reading. Is there any discussion to that motion? Okay, I see none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Board Member Belknap.
Can you remind me which one this is?
Yeah, item 14.6. The motion
Oh,
is
there it is. Okay.
R27740.
I got it, yes.
Okay. Board Member
Sorry.
Belknap. Are you a yes?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Bolter.
Aye.
Chair Huntsman.
Aye.
Board Member Nielsen.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, the next item, we just had some discussion on accreditation, and we will continue that, so there's no motion for the board. And then the final action item, I do have an amendment for this, so just letting you know in advance, Chair. It's 14.8, the School Mental Health Screening Program. The motion before the board is the committee moves that the board approve the lists of mental health conditions and screening tools that LEAs may use as amended, as developed collaboratively through USBE and DSAMH for schools to use as a part of the school mental health screening program as described in House Bill 323, 2020, and R277625.
Okay, the motion before us is that the board approve the lists of mental health conditions and screening tools that LEAs may use as amended, as developed collaboratively through USBE and DSAMH for schools to use as part of a school mental health screening program as described in HB 323, 2020, and R277625. Is there any discussion to that motion? Board Member Gravitt, if you want to bring your amendment forward.
Yes, I'd like to amend the motion, and I would like to move this item to be referenced back to committee. Sorry. I should take it off both ears, and I think I'll be able to speak today. Okay, now I can do it. I'll be perfect.
Yeah. So the amendment is to, or the motion is to refer this item back to committee.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Yeah.
Okay. So the motion before us is to refer this item to committee. Is there any discussion to that motion?
I didn't know if you wanted me to speak to that, but,
Yes, please.
okay, so if you've looked at House Bill 323, it requires that USBE and the Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health collaboratively create lists regarding screening tools and mental health conditions that the LEAs can use for screening. We have 5 behavioral screening tools that the Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health would like pulled. So we need their support in order to do this, so it needs to be referred back to committee so we can have that discussion and have some more debate on that.
Okay. So the motion before us is to move this back to committee. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Board Member Belknap.
Aye.
Board Member Bolter.
Aye.
Chair Huntsman.
Aye.
Board Member Nielsen.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously.
And that concludes standards and assessment reports.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next is our legislative session preparation 2021. The first item is the preliminary budget guidance from the GOMB. Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones will be taking this item. Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones, are you available?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry, ma'am. I couldn't get
Nope,
my
sorry.
microphone off.
Thank you.
We're on. Sorry. Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. For this particular agenda item, normally at this point in time in your September board meeting, we will have started basically drilling down on staff and field requests for additional funding ahead of the milestone, if you will, of October, where in accordance with the Budgetary Procedures Act, we're to submit budget requests to the GOMB. However, there's been some, between your last meeting in August and this one, there's been some changes in the process to follow. And as you all know, Dale Frost is our fiscal analyst. So I'd like to turn the time over, if you're okay with this, Madam Chair, on to Dale as our fiscal analyst, and who's always on top of all of the different moving pieces and parts of the process for additional funding requests, to identify to you what those changes are and our proposal, which Dale and I have talked about to the board on how to proceed in the coming months, October, November, December, and leading up into the general session, the 21 general session. So, Madam Chair, may I turn it over to Dale, please?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Dale.
Thank you, Scott. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, members of the board. It's a pleasure to talk to you at least virtually. So, Dale Frost, Fiscal Policy Analyst for the board. This is an unusual year in all respects, and budgeting is no different along those lines. The normal process that through this Budgetary Procedures Act is that by October, new funding requests need to be submitted to the governor's office, and then those are relayed on to the legislature, and they become part of the discussion for setting the following year's budget. The governor's office this year has made some changes. They are specifically not soliciting requests for new funding items for fiscal 22. Instead, they've made it clear that the governor's office priority, and these align with the priorities that we're hearing from the field, as well as the priorities that Scott and I would recommend to the board as well, which is first to fund enrollment growth, and then to fund a certain increase in the WPU, which can be decided at a later point in time. And if there are education fund revenues available, to look at restoring appropriations that were cut from the 2020 general session that were cut in subsequent special sessions. And so what the governor's office has asked, if the board is willing to do, would be to give a priority order to some or all of the reductions made from the 2020 session. You're right as a board to request new funding items outside of that. And the governor's office made it clear that we can make a special request for specific items, but we thought to start there because that's a good place to start. And right now we don't know where revenues are going to be, and it's going to be fairly uncertain for a while now. It feels like the session that's never ending. I do want to take or bring your attention to, in the board backups, there's a document called 2020 General Session Budget Item Reductions. And so these are the programs that were reduced in one of the special sessions that happened this summer. And just to orient you to that chart, I don't know, are you driving, Jeff? If you could bring up that chart. Thank you. So I'll just walk you through a couple of these just so you can understand what we're trying to show with this chart, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have. So if you look at the first line, for example, the legislature in the 2020 general session appropriated $30 million one time to go to LEAs, first to address student safety issues, and then after that to address local priorities. So you'll see that there was no base budget. It was a one-time budget item, increase of $30 million. And that item was eliminated in, I believe, the 5th special session. So there was no funding remaining, and there's no comparison to the base budget because it was a new funding item. Another example I wanted to bring you to is the MOST program, the Math Science Opportunities for Students and Teachers. That's line 4. There was $6.2 million in the base budget, and that appropriation was increased by $1 million, which was a 16% increase for $7.2 million. And that entire appropriation was removed, and that program was eliminated. And so there's 0% compared to the base budget. And then just one more example so you can kind of get a sense of how we're going about comparing things. So on line 22, the Pro Start Culinary Arts Program had $403,000 appropriated to it. That's on line 22. In the 5th special session, half of that appropriation was cut, and there's still 50% of that program remaining in that. But so the program remains just at reduced funding levels. So so what Scott and I are recommending to the board is if the board leadership and the board chooses to do that, the board look at prioritizing some or all of these reductions, and that we continue down this path to emphasize funding enrollment growth and an increase in the WPU value, and that starting in October and then in subsequent meetings that we consider prioritizing some of these reductions, and then if there are other priorities that the board wants to make, then we are happy to consider all of those. But because of the guidance from the governor's office, we are not following the same business case process for new funding because of that guidance. So I don't know if there are questions that I could answer. This is mostly an information item with action to come in subsequent meetings if the board decides to move in that direction.
Are there any questions from board members? I see none. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next part of this agenda item is requests for statutory change. Deputy Superintendent Angie Stallings.
Yes. Good afternoon, board members. Angie Stallings here, your Deputy Superintendent of Policy. I'm going to be reviewing 3 requests for statutory changes, and we have staff available for questions. The first item, we actually also have a guest with us, Spencer Jenkins from USHE, who we're going to ask Vice Chair Cummins if he can make a comment after I provide kind of just the statement of the first item. And he is, as you can see here, on the WebEx to join us. But the first item is something we talked about last month, and board members had questions. Some of that information, the questions that board members had, you can see that staff provided additional information. That backup is uploaded to Civic Clerk for you to look at. And so just as a reminder, what this statutory request would be to ask the legislature to run a bill to include FAFSA completion as a graduation requirement. And as you'll see in the backup information, Utah is second to last in the nation regarding FAFSA completion. And when students complete FAFSA, they're more likely to go to college and more likely to complete. And so Vice Chair Cummins, if you're okay, what I would recommend right now is that we turn the time over to Spencer Jenkins to provide a couple of comments on behalf of USHE, and then Nathan Ock, Spencer, and I would all be available for questions from board members after that.
Okay, go ahead. That's fine. Spencer Jenkins, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Board, for just a few moments of your time. And I understand you discussed this somewhat extensively last month, so I won't spend too much time on it. Other than, as you probably know, the Regent Scholarship has required completion of the FAFSA for the past 4 years. And the reason behind that is we found that as far as barriers to post-secondary financing is one of the biggest barriers. I think that's very common knowledge. However, we find in Utah, students are very prone to apply for scholarships. However, they do not do as good a job in filing for FAFSA. And many scholarships actually require the FAFSA, not just Regent Scholarship. And because of the reasons that we leave a lot of Pell on the table, the Board of what used to be the Board of Regents, the Board of Higher Education is also focused on increasing FAFSA completion. The board has not taken a formal position on this just because they have not had an opportunity to consider it. It will be part of a discussion of the Student Affairs Committee on September 18th and likely October. They'll take up full consideration. And I would say on behalf of the commissioner, he wished he could be here, but he would anticipate the board likely adopting that, and it'd be a nice show of unity if both boards took a position in favor of this for graduation requirements. With that, I'll leave it to any questions.
Are there any questions from board members on this? Board Member Davis.
I'm sorry if you said this already. How many other states are currently requiring the FAFSA for a graduation requirement? And do we have data showing any correlation between the requirement to fill out the FAFSA and college attendance in those states?
Well, if it's okay, I'll speak, I guess. We're aware of 4 states, Tennessee, Louisiana, Illinois, and Texas that have a mandatory FAFSA. I think Louisiana is the only place where it's been in place long enough to see any correlation to college going rates in relation to the FAFSA. It has been a positive correlation. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but maybe Nathan or Angie have that information.
Vice Chair, I do not. Nate Ock, do you have any additional information?
Yeah, this is Nathan Ock, SEM Coordinator and Early College Specialist for the Utah State Board of Education. And Board Member Davis, there is some data and some references in the additional information that refer to some research that has shown the correlations that Spencer was mentioning. And so you can find those links in the additional information attachment. And then I would also invite my UVA colleagues, Katie Mazzi and or Stephen Rogers, to provide any additional information if they have more specifics off the top of their head, if it's okay with the chair.
Is there any additional information?
Chair?
Yes?
This is Katie Mazzi. I'm not sure if Steve has joined the call, but I do have data from Louisiana. I can pour through that and get you the exact number on the correlation that they saw in the increase in enrollment after this was passed.
Okay, Board Member Earl?
Yeah, so my question.
This is Steve Rogers.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Steve, and answer the question previous.
I was just going to echo the sentiments that have been expressed that we have data that would support, the position that it does encourage and increase college going enrollment, and as well as, educating at the base level should non-traditional students need to come back at a later point, being aware of some of the financial resources that are available to them. So that's what I would add.
Board Member Earl?
If I can add one thing as well. just in terms of not necessarily mandatory FAFSA, but in terms of enrollment data for those who do file, when we look at the pool of non-filer high school seniors, nationally we see that 55% of them enroll in college immediately after high school. When we compare that to the pool of seniors who do file a FAFSA, 90% of those students enroll. And there's been data by the National College Access Network that looks at students in the lowest income quintile specifically, and they found that students in that income quintile are 127% more likely to enroll in college immediately after high school if they have a completed FAFSA on file.
Board Member Earl.
All right. So my question, there was a variety of questions asked last time, and there was some research here, but I didn't feel like it, at least on number one, it didn't quite answer what I was saying. Just, anyways, how many students do we know that have completed the FAFSA that actually complete college? The completion rate, not just the more money they take out, the greater the chance they'll complete, or the more money they receive, kind of thing. Do we have access to Utah's numbers that we can actually have something here? It would seem like that would be maybe accessible. Okay. Or if we could get that, that's what I guess what I was looking for, is the completion rate for those filling it out of college, not just starting, but completing.
So, Board Member Earl, is it okay if I respond to that, Chair?
Yes, whoever's speaking, can you speak up, please?
Oh, sorry. I apologize. Yeah, so the question is, and I realize there's some statistics here, but for Utah, how many of those that filled out FAFSA actually went on to complete college? We know, the research is saying that if you fill it out and, you will start, but is the completion rate I'm interested in. In other words, are we actually getting students to the right location? Should they be going to college? Or is there a better match for them for some type of a career or some type of a technical? Anyways, I'm just curious on that one. Did you hear me?
Go ahead, Spencer.
Okay, so I'll try to answer your question this way. 25% of students who receive gift aid, or they completed a 25% higher rate than those that don't receive gift aid. Those that receive gift aid, 80% of those people receive Pell. So hopefully that helps answer your question in kind of a diluted way. We don't have data that pulls back just Pell recipients, but I think if you look at the statistics that the graduation or the completion rate is 25% higher for those that receive gift aid, and of those that are receiving gift aid, 80% of those are receiving Pell, which requires completion of the FAFSA. So hopefully that gives you some answer to your question.
Yeah, that at least creates a little clearer picture. So I have I don't know, maybe this will end up being a motion, but while we're still in discussion, but there's a number of schools, high schools I know, that actually have, sometimes it's parent volunteers, other times it's actually staff, not the counseling staff, but staff that assist students during the last couple of months or around, actually, I'm trying to think of when it was, because this happened with my children, I'm thinking it was close to when applications are due for colleges, actually had the resources there at the school to fill out. I'm just wondering if this is something a community council can do instead of us mandating. Do you know what I mean? If we can build it into something that we already have a system in place for, instead of a mandate that you can't graduate unless you do this. I just don't see that as, I don't think that's the best direction to go in increasing this. Any thoughts?
So, Board Member Earl, this is Nathan Ock, again, early college specialist with the Utah State Board of Education. I think that there are definitely opportunities to, like the word mandate oftentimes has people bristling. And even Louisiana and other states that are implementing this have offered opt-out clauses for both, like potentially parents, but also for counselors in some cases to be able to opt students out of the FAFSA mandate. And so what Louisiana found was that by providing that opt-out clause or the kind of pressure release that they saw, as other speakers have mentioned, those increases in persistence and entrance rates. We don't know about completion yet because the initiative hasn't been going long enough. And so as a kind of middle ground, that opt-out clause provides some motivation without being a full mandate.
Nathan, can I add something to that? So UHIA helps high schools host those FAFSA completion events that you mentioned, and we coordinate volunteer coverage, not only from our staff, from college and university financial aid offices and college access entities such as Gear Up and Trio. So to put this in perspective, in 2016, we had 30 schools that participated in a FAFSA completion event. This year this past school year, we had over 130. So that's about a 230% increase in the number of schools who were hosting these types of events. In that same amount of time, though, it only moved the needle for FAFSA completion for those seniors by 5%. So I would say the FAFSA nights are very helpful, and they're definitely a necessary piece of the puzzle, but this kind of community outreach piece alone really isn't generating the kind of data that we would see with something like mandatory FAFSA completion in the legislature.
Board Member Lear?
Yes, thank you. I'm generally not a fan of compelling or adding graduation requirements, especially given some of the areas I represent, making it harder for students to grad. Oh, sorry. I thought I had that on silent, sorry. Especially given the area I represent, I don't want to make it harder for students to graduate. On the other hand, the idea of leaving money on the table that could go to needy students for filling out a form that they're sometimes not aware of seems a tragedy. So if just requiring the students to fill out the form, if the counselors help, whoever helps, and I personally think it needs to be some school personnel. I'm not comfortable with volunteers taking the kind of sensitive information from students that this form probably includes. So I think it should be a school employee. So I personally, despite the fact I don't like compulsion, and I think and I like Nathan's idea or the suggestion from wherever it came, that there is a clear opportunity to opt out of this if the student or parents are uncomfortable with it for privacy reasons or for just personal reasons. I really like that idea, but I think that something that is so helpful to students who may be first-generation college attendees is just too good to pass up. So for that reason, I think it is a good thing to do, looking for a possibility of an opt-out that is commonly understood and the counselors are trained in and those kinds of things. So it's not an obscure opt-out opportunity. Thanks.
Board Member Gravitt?
Yeah, I just want to say that if our board is committed to equity, and I think we are, I think this is an important policy request to make. FAFSA gives access. I have students who come visit me after they've graduated from high school, and I say, why aren't you in college? I never filled out my FAFSA form. Why didn't you get your parents to help? I don't know. Like, this gives access. It might make it a little tricky for some to graduate, but I think teachers will step up, and I just think it's also very educational. Filling out forms is hard for all of us, and it's a type of literacy. And I just say this is very practical, and it's a very also literacy-based requirement, and I can't imagine why we would not support something like this that would give access to so many of our students. So I'm very supportive of this policy request.
Board Member Newell?
I'm going to follow that. I believe that this is really important, and I wouldn't be concerned about mandate. Mandate creates awareness because a lot of people don't know that this is something that they have to do. The parents don't know, the students don't know. And if it's mandated, that puts a plug or a bug in their mind to say, hey, I better look at getting this done. which creates opportunity and access. So I think it's really important that we keep that the word mandate in there so that they know that this is something coming from an authority saying, we want you to complete this. And I think it's going to really turn things around if we keep that verbiage in there.
Board Member Davis.
It seems like a year or two ago, we went to DC, and one of the things we were advocating from our representatives was to streamline the FAFSA application and to make it more manageable and doable. Whatever came of that? Did they actually do that? What's the requirement to fill out the FAFSA? How extensive is it? What kind of information has to be provided? What kind of time commitment are we talking about? And then I should know this, but when you fill it out, is it, it's like a loan app. It's not just Pell Grants, it's like a loan application, right? And then what's the process after that? Then you either accept the loan or you don't automatically get the loan. I see Nate kind of shaking and moving his head around. So I'd like to hear from Nate just about what exactly happens after the application is filled out. And has it been streamlined by Congress?
Thanks for the question, Board Member Davis. I'm going to pass that one to either Spencer or Katie and Stephen, being the experts in this space.
This is Steve Rogers with the Utah Higher Education Assistance Authority. It's a great comment. Appreciate you bringing that up. Yes, so you are correct that the free application for federal student aid, FAFSA, is the gateway for all federal Pell Grant, as well as really any federal financial aid, which, as was referenced earlier, some scholarships, which are private aid, and others utilize as well. And it has gone through several iterations in terms of trying to simplify over the course of several years. I would say now there's even a mobile application where students can store and then actually more easily do the FAFSA for a subsequent year. So yes, it's been simplified. Are there ways that they're continually trying to find to simplify it even further? Yes. In terms of the general, how long does it take, kind of registering and getting initiated? I think it's fair to say that, kind of in an average time frame, a half an hour or so can typically be a good amount of time to get the form completed. Some can do it faster, some take a little bit longer as well, but I would say that's a fairly decent average.
Board Member Hanson.
Thank you. With regard to the streamlining, I did hear from somewhere that now that you can just punch in the proper information and IRS information will populate the FAFSA. So I believe that's accurate, but it has gotten better than when I first filled it out with our kids that were headed for college.
That's accurate.
Oh, thank you. I wondered about submit versus complete, because sometimes there's several rounds on these FAFSA applications where you hit send and then it comes back with other information. I wondered if I could hear thoughts on that. And then also, I'm in favor of the mandate. I think that these are dollars that could incentivize a lot of kids that normally wouldn't be headed for college to set their sights on that if they saw that it was financially, attainable, achievable for them. But I think if we do make it a mandate, that it needs to be supported. So we need to have adequate supports in place so that kids aren't struggling to get this done. There needs to be a lot of help, especially in the early years, to get this done. But if I could hear on the submit versus complete, I'd appreciate it.
This is Steve Rogers. Thanks for bringing that up as well. Typically, there's verification that happens that's automatic, such as whether or not the Social Security information matches, et cetera. And those usually happen, automatically. There are cases where there's time that they need to verify, and then once it's verified, they'll send off. And then there are other situations that are a little bit less common, where the school the school of where the FAFSAs have been sent, where they're actually processing aid packages for students, may need to verify a few things with students as well. So, we at UHIA have done a lot of legwork to inform students, not only on kind of step-by-step guides with, tutorials on how to do things, but resources on, okay, next steps, I've completed it versus submitting it. I still have some other things that need to get verified. That usually happens at the institutional level. Anything else that has an issue with the FAFSA form itself will generally let you know, or it'll be, within a 72-hour period where they have to just verify information with different administrations like the Social Security Administration. Typically, a lot of the verification that's done that takes a little bit more time is usually done at the institutional level for the post-secondary institution.
This is Spencer, also from the board, just to add on a couple of pieces to your question. For the Regent Scholarship and Promise Scholarship, which is the state's need-based scholarship, completion is required because we ask for an EFC, or an expected family contribution, which is produced on that's one of the outputs when they do complete the FAFSA.
But just to follow on that, so this graduation requirement that we're discussing, would that be a submit requirement, or would it be not feasible to have that be a complete requirement? Timing wise, I can see some issues maybe with that as well.
Understanding, submit typically is once a completed FAFSA has been sent to an institution. If that's what I'm understanding, that would be our expectation. If it's at the institutional level where everything has to be done and awards are given, et cetera, I agree with you. I think the submit in that framework, the way it's been put, would be what we would be looking for, is at least just giving them an opportunity to complete the form, that institution has it, and that they have the opportunity of getting an idea of what award packages they may be eligible for.
I'd like to speak on this item. I am 100% supportive of the concept of having students gain opportunity and access to higher education and having all the information that they need to get there. I think the infrastructure that will be necessary to implement a mandate like this is possible to put into place without a mandate. College advisors and counselors already have the ability to sit down with students and say, please fill this out. But to put a state requirement on a graduation, like here's what you have to do to graduate, seems just a little bit misput for I can't think of the right word, but to say it's the mask. Thank you, Jay. But the idea that we would say you can't graduate from high school unless you fill out a federal application for something just seems a little bit off what we should be requiring a student to accomplish to become a graduate of a Utah high school. And so to me, it just seems like these are two important topics that I don't think should be combined into one topic. And it just concerns me that we're going this route, that a student's graduation is on the line if they're trying to get their parents to upload their IRS information to the federal government. It just seems like this odd disconnect that we are creating a connection that shouldn't be made about a state. You have received a diploma and you've accomplished what you're doing, and we want you to move on to your next steps in life, but they're not the same thing to me. And I'm really concerned about connecting these two in a way that we shouldn't be connecting them, even though I do think they are both extremely important, and the access for all students is extremely important. Anyways, that's just my thoughts, and we have some more hands raised now. Board Member Davis?
Well, I guess just as kind of taking a first step into this, I think that we could do something. If we only have a 5% increase of FAFSA applications filled on those FAFSA nights, and we've increased by 100 schools, then I keep thinking there's got to be incentive programs that we could try first before we force everyone to do something to graduate high school. But then looking at that data, I'm just not sure. But I guess my question is, could we look at the complete versus the submit? At this moment, since we haven't really delved into a lot of data on this, I could support right now requiring a completion of the application, but I kind of think it should be a person's personal choice whether they hit the submit button. The student, along with his or her parent, should be able to decide if they actually want to apply for this. But if you require it to be completed, then the step that Jenny is talking about, like, it just feels too overwhelming. I just feel like I don't have any options because I can't get that FAFSA done. That would be supported and done. But pushing that submit button, I don't know, it seems really a big step to go from nowhere to there.
Board
Yeah.
Member Davis, and Chair, is it okay if I add some insight that might be useful to the conversation?
Yes, go ahead.
So I think Steve and Roger has some kind of clarity to bring to this, the submitting and the completion conversation. I think one thing that I would add is that, especially as other states have considered this, that opt-out opportunity has been a piece of the puzzle from the beginning. And so you would have the option to ensure that was a part of this conversation. Right now, it's an opt-in process that you opt into filling it out. And in another case, aligned with this ask, it would be an opt-out process. And so, like, mandate, again, isn't maybe the right word to be using in this circumstance. And with regards to the completion and submitting, Steve might have some more insight.
Thank you. I mean, I guess I would just add, it's if it's not, I mean, really, I guess the submission is the completion, is what I'm trying to say, is you complete the form and you submit it. When you do that, then you have the opportunity to have an idea of the expected family contribution and what you may be potentially eligible for. Whether you decide from that point on to pursue that at the specific institutional level, that's where I say it's totally upon the student, parent, family, however they want to proceed with that. But giving them an idea, a projected idea of what they may be eligible for by completing the initial form, I think is invaluable. So essentially, from that perspective, if that makes sense, essentially when I say submit, that really is completing it. But whether you want to go through the steps to ensure that, aid disperses and that you're enrolled and that you have the necessary hours for all of that, that would be, really incumbent upon the individual and the family to make that decision.
And also, one other thing to clarify is that when FAFSA has been submitted or completed, it doesn't tie the student to any accountability or expectations. They can do what they will with the grant aid and or both the gift aid and the potential borrowing possibilities that come with receiving their kind of assessment from filling it out.
Nathan is correct on that, because some people just do it strictly for the private funding that they're interested in pursuing, whether that be scholarships or some type of other private resource that requires it. So yeah, it's not a requirement for them to pursue and actually take aid or anything that's tied to the FAFSA.
Okay, Chair Huntsman.
There we go. Hey, I appreciate the conversation. I have quite a few concerns on this. As I knew this was coming up, I visited with as many people that I could with the present situation that we're in with social distancing and that. And I tried to keep it in the context of opportunity, motivation, and then I added privacy into a lot of the dialogue that I've had with parents. And I've talked with parents that are to do and not to do, and some of the at-risk population. And the feedback that I got was quite interesting. It was almost consistent in all of those, if we call them, three groups. And that was first of all, they're not sure if their student or if their child that's graduating, who's now a young adult, is ready for college. But then it seems like there's this pressure to get that filled out and say, oh, okay, yep, you're eligible. Yep, you've got some money coming from the federal government. And how does it come, and how much, and is it free? These were some of the concerns that parents had, and it sounds really great if you want that public, if you want that higher ed. The other concern that was attached in all of my, if I put them into three groups again, there's probably 4 or 5 different groups if I put them in categories, and that is the debt piece. once a student gets used to something free in the beginning, and then their life changes here and there, and then all of a sudden they say, oh, here's this opportunity for debt. And mom and dad aren't behind it now because I'm up here into this system. There's a temptation there that says, hey, I want to live this lifestyle. I don't mind accruing this date. I want to hang at a campus, and I want to graduate with a degree that may not have a job attached to it. So there are the negatives that definitely, if this thing moves forward, will be brought out, especially with the legislature. But I just want to go to this space back to opportunity, motivation, address the privacy side. And if there was a way that there could be an incentive and not a requirement that I'm a senior, and if I fill this form out with the help of my parent or a counselor or something, here's $300 or some kind of stipend, something, because people are going to be making an investment into this. Some kind of incentive to keep the motivation alive might be better than making a mandate. And I don't want to remind the board, but I will, when a whole bunch of graduation requirements that we were waiving not too many months ago, because people did have a choice to be completers in those requirements, but circumstances, the stars, commitment, resource, people, it just didn't happen. And I can see the same thing happening here on this requirement, with all good intentions even being mandated, even if we have an opt-out from parents, that students aren't going to get something signed or something approved, and their diploma is going to be hung up. The other concern that I had with this is there's a lot of our population that's not wanting to go to college. They're wanting to choose some trades, and they don't see this as a position to prop them up, whether they want to be a licensed plumber or a licensed electrician. So I'm not speaking against the opportunity, motivation, but I am a little bit on this hard requirement, because I think there's some things we can learn from other states, and I think it might be a little bit too soon for us here to try to force this on our student population. I think I'm going to go back to the opportunity and motivation that can happen with a lot of counselors and a lot of help that's already in place to try to get these applications in front of those that are at risk and those that want to go to college at the same time. But I'm not sure this is the time to force this upon our graduates. Does anyone want to speak to the debt piece and any of my concerns?
This is Nathan Ock, again, Early College Specialist, USB. Thanks for the questions, Chair Huntsman. Those are definitely concerns that we have also fielded as we've been talking to the field about this circumstance. And so there's a few things that I would point to that has kind of been distilled as we've had those conversations. The first is Jeff Dennings from BYU recently published a paper, and it's referenced in 2C in the additional information that links kind of human capital and like general financial well-being to access to student loans, both grant money and borrowing. And he finds a positive correlation, meaning that students who have access to money, for example, FAFSA, have better kind of long-term outcomes. To speak to the trade schools and the circumstance about maybe not pursuing a bachelor's degree, there is also applicability of FAFSA to tech colleges as well as community colleges, so that certifications can be pursued without needing to attain a kind of 4-year degree in that circumstance. And then the final kind of point that I wanted to speak to is the idea of providing an incentive versus having it be a part of a requirement for graduation. A concern that I would have if you incentivized it versus making it a requirement is that the opposite of part of our intent for having FAFSA be a graduation requirement could be an outcome. Namely, families that already have kind of opportunity and options available to them would be more likely to take advantage of incentives that were put in place. And those that first generation college students and those families that haven't been offered kind of conduits to making sense of how FAFSA can alter their kind of realities or make choices available to them. So it's a concern that I would have if the board decided to go the incentive route versus the requirement route. And then finally, just from a kind of like our hope, I think, with bringing this ask to the board is in part aligned with our kind of broader vision that the board has tasked staff with, and that is to decrease to increase representation of underrepresented students. And the kind of national data, as well as the Utah data that we included in that report, suggests that this would be a possible way forward within that space.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Board Member Belknap?
Thank you, Chair. I really struggle with the fact that we would make this a requirement. So for that reason alone, I am wondering, first of all, I won't vote for this the way it is, but I'm wondering if we could make this somehow part of the SOEP program and put it onto our academic counselors rather than forcing our children to have to do it, that they can invite them to do it. I know that sometimes they mention it, but could we do something different? And I would also throw out, maybe we're not ready to take a position on this. It seems like we're all wanting more information.
Thank you, Board Member Belknap. Board Member Nielsen? Board Member Nielsen? Okay, we'll come back to you in
Hear
a
me?
second. Oh, yep, now we can hear you. Yes.
Oh, sorry, I had it on pause. I had to kick my kids out of my room. I want to reiterate what Mark was saying, and I'm a huge advocate of college. I'm a bigger advocate of the trade schools, but making this a mandate, you cannot graduate high school unless you fill this form out. And I don't think that's the proper role of the board to say, hey, you've completed your academic requirements, but you can't graduate high school in this particular form, but this information is filled out. And I'll also reiterate what Mark had said, when it's very easy for somebody to, and I want them to get grant money. I'm I'm a big fan of that, but it's very easy to get accustomed to, oh, hey, the government paid for this and this and this. And then, well, I'll just go out and take out a loan. And a lot of times what we're seeing now, and we can see this really in many universities across the country, is a lot of these kids are getting degrees to nowhere. And it's not that they're not valuable. They're just not degrees that are going to make them a decent living. And so I don't think it's our role as the board to say you have to do it, because back to the motivation factor that Mark brought up, if students want to do it and if they want to get involved, I've been in a high school, I've been a teacher for a long time. The counselors and the teachers are going to inform them of those opportunities. So I don't think it's about students not knowing that the opportunities are there. They know that they're there. Every high school I've been in, which is 5 already, or 4 in the last 15 years, we do a pretty dang good job of making sure all those students are aware of the opportunities, FAFSA and those things like that. So I don't think the mandate's the right way to go, and that's all.
Board Member Earl?
Yeah, just back to maybe the community council end of it. I wonder if we're going to do something legislatively, I wonder if putting something in there that part of their school improvement plan, they discuss that and come up with a method for helping students complete that, completing the form, or at least educating families on it, and that be part of our community councils at the high school level, versus, once again, I'm not even really thrilled with doing a incentive type of a thing either. But making it so, and because those consist of both the educators in the communities and family members, parents in the communities, they will know their communities and what will work. A lot of times a night event doesn't work for a lot of families. They're very busy, and I think that's why we didn't see that massive increase. But they would know what needs to happen for their particular community. So I would lean that way before I would do any kind of a mandate or anything, because it creates the accessibility for those particular communities, and specifically, those councils will be familiar with their families in their area.
And just my last thoughts on it, as well as it feels like this is that little low-hanging fruit on a big problem where we say, here's a problem. We want access for students financially and to have the knowledge of their ability to access college. Here is something we could do quickly and easily to mandate a form that they have to fill out. And to me, it feels like the problem is much bigger. Why aren't they filling out the form? Why don't FAFSA nights work? Is it because their families can't get there to the school? Because FAFSA nights are held usually on campus at a school in the evening. Are their parents able to get there? Because this form requires parental participation. It's not something a student can fill out with their counselor alone. And so I think getting to the root of the issue, what is going on? Why aren't all students filling this out, or more students? And when we talk about those disproportionately affected or disproportionately finding or accessing resources for college, I think we would be better served getting to the root of the issue and why we're not getting there, rather than just creating a blanket mandate that may not solve that problem. Because will the same issue result in college applications? Are those same students who aren't filling out the FAFSA also not filling out or completing a college application form to get into college? Or do they know about the opportunities available to them? Just from my experience working with my students in their high school, there isn't a lot of conversations right now about college opportunities between a student and their counselor. What are your options? Most of the conversations are, let's get you graduated. And so how can we fix this? Because I don't think it's just a FAFSA issue. I think it's more access to college in general, or technical schools in general, and looking for those solutions rather than making a blanket mandate on a graduation requirement. And so anyways, those are just my thoughts as we move forward in trying to solve this problem, not just looking for a quick opportunity to fix something, and it may not fix the problem. But, oh, sorry, Board Member Davis, I didn't see your hand up. Go ahead.
That's fine. I do think this is a bigger issue than just this, but I also think you have to start somewhere to make a difference. So anyway, I would like to move that we postpone this vote or this agenda item and request that staff come back and bring some additional ideas of how to move the needle on this. We have the idea of mandating that everyone fills out and submits the FAFSA, or you can opt out. Are there other ideas? And I'll just kind of give an example. We were at the conference, the USHE conference, and we've hired all these folks to help students fill out the FAFSA. And they were reporting certain numbers of increases of submissions of the FAFSA. And then someone else stood up who has a family app, and they give like $50 gift cards for kids to submit the FAFSA. And the data was higher than these people we had hired to help kids fill out the FAFSA. So are there options like that? I just texted that person, but she hasn't gotten back to me, just to find out what is the data and how is a $50 gift card to, wherever they're giving them to, more salient to kids than an adult who will sit down and help them work through it. Can we look at some additional ideas? It's a really long way to say I move to postpone the agenda and ask if we can think of some more options for us to consider in our advocating, in addition to this one, as we wrap our heads around this.
Okay, just for clarification, for clarification on the motion, this agenda item has more than just this item, so you would like to postpone this particular item? Is that correct? The question of FAFSA requirement. Is that your second as well? Okay. Okay, so the motion before us is to postpone the discussion on the FAFSA requirement, item 1A, and requesting some information from staff to bring back ideas of other options that may get to the same goal that they were seeking in this requirement. Did that get to your motion correctly? Yes, I'd love to. Okay. So data in reference to other states' mandatory requirement and then other options that might be viable. Correct. Okay. So that's the motion. Did you want to speak to that, Board Member Davis? Okay, Board Member Hanson.
Oh, that's fine, as long as the data from the existing programs is included. I
Okay.
think that would be helpful for us to look at that.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Newell?
I'm for postponing as well, but I want to really make a request here that staff is brave in investigating the cultural differences that create these issues, in meeting and talking with the people that are impacted, and the ones that aren't showing up, and the reasons they aren't. Many of these students are so excited just to get through school, and they're not looking for anything at that point in time. There's a mad race to the door. And we have to put up a fence at some point in time, say, hold on just a second. Not a wall, but a fence. To say, hey, we'll open this up for you, but you need to look at these other options before you run through that door. And I think that's what we're looking for. So I just implore staff to take that time to do some deep diving into these cultural differences and the reasons why people don't show up, and reasons why people are fearful of filling out these forms, and gain a real understanding of what the issues are that are impediments to this being completed.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Gravitt.
I'm just wondering if I can amend the motion to have this concept be brought to a committee for discussion, to talk about policy calls, the opt-out issues. I think it might be better served in a committee where a lot of that deep work could be done. Standards and assessment would love to have it, but, right, Jenny? Right. Anyway, I wonder if I could amend the motion.
Without objection, we'll, to the motion maker and the seconder, that this, when it comes back, it would return to committee.
Okay.
Okay.
What's the timing though? Legislative change?
So you're asking about time frame for a legislative change. So yes, I do think we do have time before the legislative session to get that into committee and before the full board. So, okay. Okay, so the motion before us then is to postpone the FAFSA requirement request, asking for data from other states who have implemented this, as well as other possible solutions to get to this same result. All in favor? Oh, excuse me, Board Member Nielsen, you have your hand up? I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'll put it down.
Okay.
But I'm an aye.
Okay, seeing no discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Board Member Belknap?
Aye.
Board Member Bolter?
Aye.
Chair Huntsman?
Aye.
And Board Member Nielsen was an aye. Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Okay, Deputy Superintendent Angie Stallings, if you want to take us to the next item on this agenda.
Yes, thank you. So this second one, many of you may be familiar that whenever we undergo a new standards review process, there's a committee formed, and part of that committee includes members who are parents, and those parent members are currently nominated by the Speaker and the Senate President. And part of that has created a difficulty in getting their attention, or having them provide the names for those nominations or those people to serve on the committee. what staff is recommending that instead we work with the legislature to establish a different process to get parent members on the committee, and that would be something where we would publish it similar to how we do other positions or appointments that we have available on the board. So that is number 2. I don't know if you have any questions on that one.
Board Member Earl?
Yeah, so the board already picks, I say the board, staff already picks, and then I guess the board president, right, 7 members. So 7 of the 17, 5 for each house, right, from the legislature, so 10 from there. So we're already picking 7 of those. I guess the question is here, is it inconvenient to have requests that they provide public for that, or parents for that? And I think part of the argument was that, they're not always timely, I guess, unless they're given a time frame. And of course, I don't think we always consistently know exactly how many times, it's just kind of random when we actually do our standards, right? Meaning that it's not every August do they have to pick people, or not every July. So when they're given a deadline, do they get the names in? Or are you still waiting a month? That's my question.
Well, we are generally still waiting quite a few. It's many weeks after we give them the deadline. But it looks like Jennifer Thronson is also available, and she has more to do with this and may have additional feedback and comments.
Okay.
Thank you. Chair, may I speak to the question?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you. Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. And basically with the standard revision process we have at the board, the first step in us being able to even go for names is the board's approval to seek standards revision. And so that's kind of the kickoff point. So we wouldn't be afforded the opportunity to ask for these names earlier to kind of prevent this delay in the process. And so because the first step is to seek board approval to say we even get to engage in this process, then that cues us to be able to ask the legislature for the names. This opportunity really gives the board a little bit more power and guidance over the situation, allows us to get a more diverse pool by eliciting names and various strategies. We have lots of networks that we can kind of send the message out through Mark Peterson's and public relations kind of connections, as well as board members could submit them to their own communities. And so it would give us an allowance to have a more diverse population coming in, as well as the board's opportunity to weigh potentially more into who out of, like, if we have multiple names and need to kind of randomly select if we want that process, or if the board wants to look at the type of stakeholder or the age of children they have in the system, or maybe not age, but if they have elementary or secondary students, to help select the participants, that would allow the board to have a little more control over the process and allow us to have a more speedy response, because that list would be kind of compiled ongoing. And so whenever a standard revision process came up, we'd be able to leverage that list moving forward.
Okay. I guess, do we have our 7 people ready to go?
Yes, Board Chair Huntsman was able to review the list we provided and selected 7 of those representatives for ours. So we are still awaiting the legislature's list, and so that's kind of where we're held up right now. One of them said, I think it was the House, she's close. The other one I have not heard back from, even though we followed up last week. So we asked about 3 weeks ago, and then I checked in again, and we're kind of still waiting. I'd expect probably another 3 to 4 weeks before we really have names.
Okay, so, and then my other thought is, when we say we, it's not really the board, it would be staff. That's what it's been in the past, right? And I think part of the reason why it comes from the legislature, so that it has a different feel to it, and not just, staff from the state board. It creates a representation that they're calling on and picking from, and that kind of a thing. So, anyways, those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, the goal would be obviously to come to you all and make rules around it, but ultimately still having the 7 that we would refer on to board chair, and then allowing the board to kind of see the selection of the committee based on what we have, or if the board wants more influence in that, to bring the list of potential candidates and allow the committee, standards and assessment committee most likely, to review the options and select potentials, probably with a couple backups in case people aren't available, from the list that we would be compiling on that ongoing basis. So it really would be up to you as board to decide how in the weeds you want to get, but if we really want to have a broader representation, staff goes with the stakeholders and people we engage with on a frequent basis, where this more survey strategy would be people that we would not necessarily know or have any connection to. And so again, gets at what the House and Senate affords, but through a more strategic, efficient process.
Okay, Superintendent Dixon.
Yeah, this is something, thank you, Madam Chair. This is something I personally feel strongly about because I sat at the table with then Speaker Becky Lockhart and legislators who were desirous to bring this bill forward and have this process happen at the House and Senate level. And I think it was really well intended to all the points that Member Earl and Dr. Thronson have both made. The challenge has been both. So I was over on the teaching and learning side in Dr. Thronson's position when this started, and then all along the way. So I kind of have the genesis and the history of this. And it has been a challenge all along to get these names from the Senate and the House to the point where they get frustrated and come to us and say, can you just give us names? And then we say, no, this is really codified for you to do this. And so I just think it's been challenging, and at times they get the same names for all of the content areas. So I have for several years talked with legislators and board members about how do we broaden this so we have opportunities for more parents who just may not be aware. So having some kind of ongoing form or way for anybody who wants to be involved, a parent who wants to be involved, to be able to submit their name, I think would be very helpful. And it wouldn't take, there's probably a space for the legislature to weigh in as well, you know, if they wanted to direct people there. But the intention and where it started to get a more broad-based and feel like there were many voices at the table has turned into something that's just painful at times to get names, both on the legislative side to find those names and for us to keep waiting. So I just wanted to weigh in because I think there's a better way to do this to get to the same outcome that was intended with the original piece of legislation. And I think we can broaden the base of parents, meaning more diverse group and more parents that will be interested. So that would be on us to really make sure that we had the marketing behind it as well. Thank you.
I don't see any additional questions on this item. Angie, if you'd like to move forward to the last item.
Yes, thank you. So the last item you won't be surprised by. It's a request to ask for legislation to reinstate the MOST program. That's the Mathematics and Science Opportunities for Students and Teachers program. As you'll remember, last time we met, the board actually made a motion to reinstate this program as well as others during the last special session. We weren't able to make that happen for various reasons, but staff also support reinstating this MOST program. I will just give the caveat that at this point we would be working, if you support this, we would be reaching out to a legislator to open a bill file, but then of course would need to wait until a later date for you all to determine what amount of appropriation would be appropriate to tie to that. But approving this today would at least allow us as staff to ask a legislator to open a bill file to reinstate the program.
Any questions from board members? Chair Huntsman. Nope. Board Member Davis.
I just want to add, I think that I sent a survey results to all of you that were qualitative data survey results. And also, in addition to that, we had a teacher contact us about losing her math lab, I had a board member from a district say that they use those funds to hire extra period for science and math teachers. And we also had a charter director call and say that they are losing a full math teacher this year because they lost those funds. So I just hope we'll take this seriously. And then I also I'm going to make a motion to add another piece of legislation to this list. So whatever the order, you can roll me into that. I'll leave that up to you, but I want to put it out there on the table.
Chair Huntsman? Chair Huntsman?
Thank you. I'm curious, and this will be directed to Deputy Superintendent Stallings, that in our last board meeting, we had a list of some things that were repealed, and now it seems like we're just putting one of them back on. And the second piece of this, before I really feel excited about the MOST program and trying to bring it back and trying to even with the challenge with the financial challenge that we're having able to see on the future, is I'm not sure how we could get that data, but I am curious, out of all of our LEAs, how many of them use their parts of their WPU to keep their MOST program going. And I'm sure there's got to be some out there, but that data would be really important to me before pushing on the throttle here and going deep and bringing most back, and then also trying to tie a fiscal note to it. Can you speak to those two items, please?
Sure. Thank you. So as you remember, there were 5 programs there were 6 programs that were repealed. One of the 6 in that HB 5012 was a brand new program that had passed in 2020. It was a very small reimbursement program. So that wasn't one of the programs that the board made the motion on last board meeting. So with the 5 remaining, one of them, the National Board Certified Teachers program, was included in a special session bill during the 6th special session that occurred in August. So that means 4 left. We had the MOST, we had special education intensive services, we had the early graduation scholarship program, which is also called Centennial Scholarship. And then the 4th one was a repeal of some WPUs for small school districts. And what we learned after the motion was made by the board is that the fiscal analyst's office and the legislature understood that they took care, although they repealed that specific program for additional WPUs for small schools and charter schools, that they actually funded that in a different way. And so the legislature was not open to that, reinstating that 4th program, because they felt like they had handled it differently. So to answer your question, Chair Huntsman, there's 3 programs. There would be MOST, the Special Education Intensive Services Program, and then the Early Graduation Scholarship, Centennial Scholarship Program 3. So as to your question about why we're only presenting one, I will just say that, we offer the process to fill out these requests to all staff, and this one was filled out by likely the staff that administer the MOST program for the reasons that Board Member Davis suggested, that there's some survey data, there's been demand for that program. And as to why we haven't submitted requests for the other 2, we could, and if the board would like, we could add those today, or I could have or ask staff who've worked with both of those programs to work on something. And I think those were the questions you had, Chair. But I could be wrong. Oh, I know the other question you asked was whether or not we have any data, or whether we could get data on how many districts or charters continue to fund the programs that they had been using MOST program funds for. And that would be a question I'd need to ask our staff who work with the program. And I think they could likely do some of that research and reach out to the previous most program recipients. But I don't personally have that information right now.
Board Member Cannon?
Hey, thank you. That answers my question. I can wait on, I'm good to wait on those other two programs. Let's see where how staff weighs in on them. And then on the most program, that data, if that data is out there or can be obtained, I think it would benefit the board, and it definitely would help me with my space as far as how aggressive we get on a fiscal note or something, how this is viewed. Because I know on the local level that people have jumped into their WPU to keep programs going, but I don't know. And I've heard on most, some have, but I haven't reached out to a lot of districts. So if that data is there, that'd be helpful for me, and I think also to the board. Thank you.
Board Member Cannon, do you want to hit your mic light again?
You. A question for Angie. I know that you said you hadn't determined how much of a fiscal note to add to this. My 2 cents worth is, I see they've been funded since 2008 at $6.2 million. So that's a long time without a raise. But then they got an additional $1 million appropriated in the last legislative session. And that is the part that I have a little unease about, because at the last legislative session, all new money was swept off the table. And I don't know that I feel like I want to put this particular program in an elevated position where they get the money from the last legislative session that everyone else has lost. So that's just my 2 cents worth.
Board Member Earl?
I'd like to, I'm wondering if we can get information. I would like it if we looked at the Centennial Scholarship again, but I just want some information from staff, maybe moving forward, maybe at the next board meeting, if that's possible, on the different parts to that. So, I mean, it's kind of part of this dialogue, but I'd like some information on how many kids were using it, that kind of a thing, at possibly looking at maybe requesting that funding come back.
Okay. Board Member Davis?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that we unanimously voted to ask for this legislation to be reinstated. These, just to Board Member Cannon's concern, these are the only programs that were eliminated here. So it wouldn't be necessarily elevating them. And also today, we wouldn't determine the amount of money that would go towards these. It would just be a request to reinstate the language into code. But to note, this is the second time I'm going to quote this guy, and I barely even know him, but the BA in Jordan, he actually said that the most program of any of the state level grant programs or initiatives that he's seen come out, he said he feels that this is the most impactful for students and teachers. But I'd like to go ahead and make another motion. I would like to add, I move that we add to this list that staff work with the legislature to reinstate the Intensive Services Fund program through legislation, including a recommendation that the legislature set professional salary rates for reimbursement. And I'd like to speak to the motion.
So I just have a procedure question. So this is a motion to add to a list that staff brought forward. So there's no actual motion on the table for the board to consider at the moment. So is that your intent, to add this to the staff's list?
I can make this a separate motion if that adds clarity.
Okay. Either way. So I just want to make sure that we're clear that there is currently no motion on the table. So adding this to something. So
Okay.
are you adding this to
I just would like
staff's
this to be
list?
a request, yes.
So you would like to make the motion that this be a board request, a statutory request? Okay. Thank you. Is there a second? Okay, so the motion is that staff work with the legislature to reinstate the Intensive Services Fund program through legislation, including a recommendation that the legislature set professional salary rates for reimbursement. Is there discussion to that motion?
I'd like to speak to the motion if I still can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I think that we're seeing a need with all of this talk we've been speaking about intensive services funds lately. I think the bigger issue, aside from the smaller issues we've been dealing with, is that our students that are the most vulnerable and the most expensive are underfunded. We need more funding for, and I can hear Carol in my voice go, we need more funding for everybody, which I can hear you in my ears saying that as I speak. But this in particular, just to give some context here, we had $39 million of requests for reimbursements of money that was spent for intensive services for students with special needs. $39 million. Leah and her staff, Dr. Voorhees, really went through that piece by piece and cut out anything that couldn't be considered the very most valid legal request and whittled that down to $12 million. And we had 4 or just under or something like that, right around 4 to meet those requests. That is problematic. Additionally, a school LEA for a student, these high needs students, gets 1 general ed WPU. And then they get 1 special ed WPU. And then they have to eat the expenses up to $21,000 before they can even request a reimbursement. And that reimbursement comes only for expenses after the $21,000. So they don't even get reimbursed for that first part that they have to eat. So this $12 million we're talking about isn't even included in the first $7,000 per child that they're eating. This isn't right. When we want to talk about equity, this is inequitable. Not only that, but the code is problematic. And one of the things, as I've talked with Dr. Voorhees, that's problematic and makes the formulas in the code inequitable is that we don't have salary rates set for the reimbursement requests. So, for example, you could get a school district that could get much more money than someone else for a 1 student to a 1 student request because this school pays the nurse $54,000 a year, and this school pays the one-to-one nurse $60,000 a year. And this one's always going to get the reimbursement because there's not a set salary rate written in the code. So I am asking that we make this a legislative request, and we can discuss amounts later. But what's happening is not right. And these are our very most vulnerable students that we educate anywhere in our whole entire system. And this needs to change. And so I move that we change it. Thanks.
Board Member Lear?
Thank you. I seconded this for purposes of discussion, but I was first going to ask Cindy what she meant by salary rates. Now I know. I'm wondering if it would be better stated to say.
Board Member Lear, can you speak, I'm sorry, right into your mic so people online can hear us? Sorry.
But I can't read out of the back of my head
I know.
either, so we have a problem.
I'm sorry.
Let me take this off for a minute. I wonder if it could be stated to say, the legislature direct the board to set salary rates. Would that be an acceptable amendment? Because I would feel much more comfortable with the expertise of Dr. Voorhees helping the board set salary rates than I would in a bill.
Can I amend the language without making a full amendment? Because you can just take the word that second word legislature out and it would do that very thing. I don't care if the legislature does it with our input or we do it, but all it needs to do on that line is say, including a recommendation to set professional salary rates for reimbursement. And it can be done by them or by us. I don't care who it's done by, but it needs to be done to fix some of those inequities in the.
And if I may follow up for just a minute?
Yes.
And my concern is that maybe the only thing worse than not having it set is having it set poorly or completely irrationally. So that's why I would like someone or some group committee with expertise to set it. So.
Do you like what she wrote based on board-approved professional salary rates?
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, without objection, we'll just take that as your motion. Is that okay?
Thank you, and
See any
that's my
objection.
comment.
Okay, Board Member Belknap?
Yes, I understand this, but I think it's bigger than just one quick motion here. We don't have any background on the numbers and the things that Cindy were bringing up, and it would be really nice as board members to be able to see where we're lacking money, what's the problem with not having a professional salary rate. I think this is kind of just being thrown at us right here, and I actually would like to ask that we bring this back with more information. Cindy, I hope you don't mind that. I don't feel like that we as a board have all our ducks in a row, and I'd like to see what Leah Voorhees has and information and what we get from the feds versus what we can get from the state and who's getting what salaries now and how it varies from district to district.
Is that a motion, Board Member Belknap?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
That was a long motion, sorry. I would like to make a motion that this be brought back.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Okay, so the motion before us is to bring back this request with the data that was used by Board Member Davis to make the motion. Is that correct?
Yes, and more information from Leah Voorhees as well. Where does the money come from for intensive services? What's the split out there? And also, what are some of the inequitable distributions of the professional salary rates in this area?
Okay, so the motion before us is to bring this back and with data from Dr. Voorhees in regards to this money's disbursement, where it comes from, and any inequities that might flow into this conversation. Any discussion to that motion? Board Member Davis?
I'll speak against the motion. I think that it's a great recommendation to have her come before we start talking about numbers and figures of if how much do we really want to ask for state funds. We get federal funds for special education, and we can allocate up to 10% of those funds to go to intensive services. But I think certainly before we start figuring out what we want to ask for state-wise or what we want to do with numbers, we should have Dr. Voorhees come and answer all those questions. But I do think we have enough information today to know that we can start the conversation by requesting that this legislative language comes back.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion to the motion to bring this back at a later date, I'll take a vote. All in favor of bringing this back with the data, please say aye. Nays? No. Okay. Board Member Belknap?
Aye.
Board Member Bolter?
No.
Board Member Chair Huntsman?
Aye.
Board Member Nielsen? Board Member Nielsen? does not appear to be present for this. Okay, will the ayes please raise their hand? Okay, Board Member Newell, Board Member Cannon, Board Member Davis.
Sorry, I got confused.
Oh, okay. Sorry, starting over. Please raise your hand if you're an aye. Board Member Newell, Board Member Cannon, Board Member Earl, Board Member Marsh, Board Member Hanson, Board Member Huntsman, and I'm an aye. That motion does not pass. Okay, so we're back to the main motion, which is that staff work with the legislature to reinstate the Intensive Services Fund program through legislation, including a recommendation that the distribution formula for reimbursement be based on board-approved professional salary rates. Is there any further discussion to that motion?
Just one quick thing.
Board Member Davis?
Just want to make a note that we actually, in our last meeting, already voted unanimously to bring this language back, along with the MOST program and the Centennial Grant Program and the Rural District Small Whatever Program. We voted unanimously to bring this language back to legislation and have these programs reinstated in our last meeting.
And I would clarify that in the last meeting, the motion was to approach a certain legislator on a bill that he had in order to have this conversation so that we could kind of analyze these programs. And I think that's, just from my perspective, I think that's what board members are asking us to do before we ask now again, is that we maybe put some analysis behind the programs before we send them to the legislature. So just some, maybe from my perspective, how I felt when we voted on that last month as opposed to our conversation this month as well. Okay, so we have the Board Member Belknap, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to make one more comment that we just continue to ask for things when we don't really have all the data behind it. I'm kind of frustrated with this one because it wasn't on our agenda for us to go ask questions and to find out about. I know we have a problem here. I know we need to fix something, but I can't put a pinpoint on exactly what needs to be fixed. And I'd rather go to a legislator and tell them, this is what we need.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further discussion, the motion before us is the staff work with the legislature to reinstate the Intensive Services Fund program through legislation, including a recommendation that the distribution formula for reimbursement be based on board-approved professional salary rates. All in favor, please say, Jenny. Board Member Earl.
Sorry, a clarification. The last motion was to have staff bring us information about this. Is this right?
So the motion that did not pass.
Oh, it did not pass. Okay, okay, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that clarifies.
Yes, Board Member Hanson.
Could I just have someone read back the motion that passed last time so that we understand where we are with this? I understand we've already taken some action with regard to this.
Lorraine, do you by chance have access to the motion that was made in the last meeting?
I do. I will look that up right now.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
This is Scott. Hey, Madam Chair, if I may, can I get some additional clarity as staff that will likely work on this, motion? May I get some deeper clarity from Board Member Davis, ma'am?
You have a question for clarity, is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, go ahead.
For Board Member Davis.
Okay, go ahead.
Ma'am, Board Member Davis, are you asking staff would just go back and look at an Intensive Services Fund program formula just strictly for professional salary rates, or just an overall formula? Can you clarify that for me, please, ma'am?
Go ahead, Board Member Davis.
We would reinstate the intensive services legislation that was repealed in a special session, but we would work to improve and make it more equitable by creating these salary rates so that one person doesn't get all the funding every year.
One salary rates for special education teachers, ma'am?
No. The service providers that are given for reimbursable expenses like a one-on-one nurse, a physical therapist, an interpreter.
For all- okay.
Yeah, some states have gone through and made this a more equitable process by creating salary rates that LEAs can't surpass to one-up each other or whatever, even if they're not trying to do that, just to get rid of that disparity, so everyone can only request a certain amount. Even if they pay the one-to-one nurse more, they can only request for reimbursement up to this amount so that those formulas become more equitable.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Board Member Earl?
Yeah, I'm feeling like I also need more information. The more I'm kind of filtering this through my mind and such, and I am very much for us making sure we adequately fund our intensive services. So, anyways, but I'm feeling like I probably don't have enough knowledge to make a informed decision for the legislature right now to say go do this without some further direction or more information. So,
Okay, thank you. Angie Stallings, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. One thing I was just going to clarify, a couple things. Number one, I believe it was June, there was a section of code that was repealed, which is the intensive services program, and it had a certain formula, a very prescriptive way of distributing the funding that I think Board Member Davis is saying there are some that don't like that old formula. Before that program was repealed, staff actually was going to create a working group to get some ideas from the field on what that formula could look like, and then bring a potential request to you all to get that formula changed in statute. Now, because the program was repealed, staff stopped work on that work group that they were going to get together to come up with a different formula. So I think what the motion that you all would have made, or that you made last board meeting that Lorraine's looking up, was really just to reinstate that already existing formula that was there prior to it being repealed on June 18th. And so I think what you're hearing from staff is just some questions about what that formula would look like, what we would take to the legislature. And another option is, I'm just trying to brainstorm, is I guess you could make a motion to have staff get a bill file open and then maybe ask staff to work on the alternate formula if we don't know what that formula is right now.
Chair Huntsman?
Yes, thank you, Angie. That's where I was wanting to go with this. In the previous motion, if it got traction, then that would come back, and as it's coming back, then you can work the formula, work for betterments within that previously ran intensive service fund program. So we could, but the way I'm seeing this motion isn't bringing anything back. It's basically we're gonna redo our intensive service fund program, including that distribution formula, and also adding and board approved professional salary rates. And so we're already, well, the way that I'm seeing this is, the way that this particular motion is put together is, we're already pigeonholing us and putting guardrails on the conversation and limiting somewhat what our proposed betterments would be in rolling this and going forward with the way that this motion's put together. I feel like my hands will be somewhat tied, and we're basically reinventing something in a short period of time. This is how I'm seeing it, and that's part of my concern.
Board Member Davis?
Yes, I would like to amend my motion to read that staff work with the legislature to reinstate the Intensive Services Fund program, including recommendations from a USBE working group to revise distribution formulas. That can be inclusive of salary rates and anything else that the working group feels we need to look at to create a more equitable distribution.
Is there a second? I'll second that. Okay, so the amendment is to add the words including recommendations from a USBE working group and exclude some other words that are gone and I can't read them now.
About that, I think I'll stop typing now.
So, okay, so the amendment would read that staff work with the legislature to reinstate the intensive services program through legislation, incorporating recommendations from a USBE working group to revise the distribution formula for reimbursement. Is there any discussion to that amendment? Okay, Lorraine, you have your hand up. Did you want to speak to this amendment, or do you have the motion from last month?
You know, I could find nothing in last meeting where a motion was made about this. So maybe I'm looking in the wrong spot, but I can't find anything in the minutes.
It was in the portion of the meeting where we were talking about Representative Moss's bill.
Okay, let me go back and look at that then. Thank you.
Okay. Any discussion to the amendment?
And I do have the old motion if you did want to look at it. I've got it right here. I just have to switch how I share. Would
No,
you like
that's
me to do that right now?
We'll just need it if this doesn't pass.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, and any discussion to the amendment? Board Member Bolter.
Thank you. I have a question. Would the revised distribution formula be brought back to the board for us to look at, that the USBE working group comes up with prior to being sent to the legislators?
Would you like me to answer that?
Yes, please.
Whoever would like to. It was Cindy's motion, so I don't know what her intent is with the motion, but I'm just wondering if we would look at that revised formula.
Well, the way the motion is drafted, it sounds like staff should go ahead and work with the legislature on a bill file to reinstate the program and incorporate recommendations from the USBE work group. So I guess the question is, you could either say incorporating board approved recommendations from a USBE work group, or you could just direct staff to actually create or to bring back recommendations from the work group on the formula. So I don't know if that helps. This motion, I think, just assumes that we get the work group in place, get the recommendations, and then work on the draft.
Okay, yes, we would like to have something brought back just so that we have an idea of what those recommendations are as a board.
We can add in the words board approved with no objection.
Okay, if there's no objection, we'll add the words board approved recommendations. Thank you. Okay. Seeing no further let's see. So Lorraine, were you able to find, sorry, this is just the amendment, but go ahead, Lorraine, if you have that.
I do. Sorry. It helps if you look at the right meeting. So,
okay.
This was from the August 18th meeting. And this was an amendment that was passed that went to the main motion, but it was that the board directs staff to work with the legislature to reinstate the following programs in the Public Education Funding and Enrollment Amendments Draft Bill: small school district administrative costs, appropriation for intensive special education costs, early graduation incentives, math and science opportunities for students, and salary supplement for National Board Certified Teachers.
Thank you. That answer your question? Okay. So I see no further discussion. So the amendment states, there it is. Okay, the amendment states that staff work with the legislature to reinstate the Intensive Services Fund Program through legislation, incorporating board-approved recommendations from a USBE work group to revise the distribution formula for reimbursement.
And that's a motion, not an amendment. I don't know if that matters.
There was an amendment to the original motion. You made an amendment to your original motion.
I just said without objection, we can add the words, but
C-
however you.
Which was USBE, but the other part you made as as an amendment? Right? Somebody can tell me if I'm getting lost in all this. Okay.
However.
Okay.
Chair?
Yes.
Oh, never mind. I was just going to say, to make it simpler, I wondered if we wanted to just delete this. I mean, just knowing that the staff will do that and bring recommendations to you, but because I know it's not worded very well. Is that kind of what you're alluding to, is the wording of the motion?
No, Board Member Davis made the original motion and then she amended it. And then the USBE was added later as just as an addition. We didn't make a formal amendment for that. So just in Robert's rules, we are at a place where an amendment was made. So just trying to make sure that I'm staying in the lane I'm supposed to be in. It doesn't matter if we leave that or move it out. So this is the amended motion. We will be voting on the amendment. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Board Member Belknap?
No.
Board Member Bolter?
Aye.
Chair Huntsman?
Aye.
Board Member Nielsen? He doesn't appear to be on as well. Okay. Were there any no's? Sorry. Were there any no's in here? I'm running out of oxygen. Sorry. Okay, so there were no, so that motion passes with one no vote, Board Member Belknap. So now we're back to the main motion, that the staff work with the legislature to reinstate the Intensive Services Fund program through legislation incorporating board-approved recommendations from a USB work group to revise the distribution formula for reimbursement. Okay, back to the main motion. Is there any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Board Member Belknap?
No.
Board Member Bolter?
Aye.
Chair Huntsman?
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes with one no vote, Board Member Belknap. Okay. So now we're still on our item request for statutory changes. Is there any other motions that board members would like to make? Angie, is there anything else that you wanted to speak to on that item?
I don't think, well, there is one thing in the notes or the chat. You may have seen that Cami Dupree does have some data in response to Chair Huntsman's questions about LEAs and their programs, but I don't know if you want to take the time now to hear some of that data or not. I think the other thing Chair Huntsman stated is that he at least wanted that data if and when we made a request for an appropriation to tie to the program reinstatement. Because just as a reminder, right now, all we would be doing is requesting a bill file to be open to reinstate the language, and then we would wait to determine what that appropriation level should be once you all have made a determination on that.
Okay. Is there a motion in regard to that one from a board member? Board Member Davis?
I'm kind of confused about where we even are now, but I move that we, I don't even know if there's language written somewhere in an agenda somewhere, but I move that we propose numbers 2 and 3 in the legislative proposal for board consideration.
Okay, so is there a second to that motion? So just to reiterate, that's Standards Review Committee, USBE legislative request, and the most USBE legislative request. Is there a second to that motion? Okay, so the motion before us is to direct staff to work with legislators on potential amendments to Utah Code on the Standards Review Committee requests and the most requests. Any discussion to that motion? Board Member Earl.
Asking that we divide 2 and 3.
Okay, so there's a motion to divide. Is there a second? Okay.
Second.
Good. So the motion is to divide. All in favor of dividing, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Board Member Belknap.
Aye.
Board Member Bolter.
Aye.
Chair Huntsman.
Aye.
Okay, the motion to divide passes unanimously. Okay, so we'll take the first item, which is the motion would then be that the board direct staff to work with legislators on potential amendments to the Standards Review Committee legislation. Any discussion to that motion? Board Member Davis.
That we've just heard from our superintendent that that's been a concern for a lot of years. I think that's a pretty compelling argument.
Okay. Board Member Earl?
Yeah, I think I'd like to get some more information from legislators themselves as far as what the process is for them, and then go from there before we tell them to, or direct staff to do something about it. So.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, the motion before us is to direct staff to work with legislators on potential amendments to the Standards Review Committee legislation. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, Board Member Belknap?
Aye.
Okay, Board Member Bolter?
Aye.
Chair Huntsman?
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes with 1 no vote. Board Member Earl. Did I miss anybody else? Okay. Okay, the next motion then is that the board directs staff to work with legislators on potential amendments to Utah Code in regard to the MOST program. Okay, any discussion to that motion? Board Member Davis.
Yeah, I think that here we're not adding necessarily a fiscal note. We're making the exact same motion that we voted on unanimously the last time, which is to have this legislation reinstated. And Cammie's added some data we can study. And in fact, I would encourage anyone to call her. I've talked to her. She probably feels ad nauseum, and she's got so much good information on this program. So I would say we just stick with what we did before and ask for this to be reinstated, and then study that data prior to making our determinations on amounts, but get working on getting the legislative wording reinstated.
Board Member Hanson?
Can I just ask why we need this motion if we've already voted for this one to go forward with the?
So the former motion was specific to a bill in a special session that is passed, and it wasn't added. And so this is a new motion to request it. Okay. I'm going to speak against this motion just because I think the reason why I voted for it last time was get it back on the books and then have a discussion. But now we have time to really look at this program and see its impact in Utah schools and to see what some of that data is. And so I think a little bit of time is on our side to really have a good strategic ask and not just reinstate and then we'll talk about it. And so I'm going to vote no on this, not because I'm not in favor of the program, but because I think we have the time to make this be a very productive and a well-informed ask rather than just a reinstatement ask. But, okay, I see no other discussion. The motion before us is to Direct staff to work with legislators on potential amendments to the most legislation. Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Okay. Okay, Board Member Belknap?
No.
Okay, Board Member Bolter?
No.
Chair Huntsman?
Come on, no.
Okay. Will the ayes please raise their hand? Okay, so Board Member Newell, Board Member Davis, Board Member Haynes, Board Member Gravitt, Board Member Lear, Board Member Earl, Board Member Marsh, Board Member Hanson. The motion passes. Yeah. Okay, Angie, is that everything on this agenda item?
Yes, it is. Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.